Did you know? The Nintendo 64 had over 350 officially licensed games during the console's lifespan. While games like Super Mario 64 and The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time remain revered classics today, some games aren't so fondly remembered. It may surprise you that a lot of poorly received titles had an interesting production, and in many cases, a game's lack of quality or polish wasn't the fault of the developers. Time constraints, budget cuts, last-minute changes, and even meddling from out-of-touch executives can all profoundly impact a game's production. Today, we'll be looking at some of these titles to see what went wrong and, where possible, talk to the developers who worked on them. When talking about N64 games that received little praise, there's one title that sticks out among the rest. Superman, the New Superman Adventures, better known as Superman 64, has the distinction of being rated the worst N64 game by numerous outlets, and is perhaps one of the worst games of all time. The Man of Steel flew onto the N64 to poor reviews, with fans criticizing the controls, level design, and presence of numerous glitches that held the game back. The title was largely based on the TV show Superman the Animated Series. As a TV tie-in, it seemed like a lucrative endeavor for developers Titus Interactive, as well as license holders Warner Bros. Titus already had experience with game development, and at this point had made a few N64 games. So what went wrong? Eric Kahn, one of the founders of Titus, originally approached Warner Bros. Licensing to get the rights to Superman. Shortly after making a deal, Warner Bros. Licensing staff was shuffled around, and friction between Titus and Warner Bros. Began to heat up. The original plan was for Titus to release an N64, PlayStation 1, and a Game Boy game based on Superman the Animated Series. The Game Boy version was completed in a short time, but the N64 game is where the situation got complicated. Originally, Eric Kahn and his team wanted to make a game that resembled Tomb Raider, where players would control Superman in an action-adventure title involving some real-time strategy. The game would be open world and let Superman fly, fight, and include all his superpowers. Despite these goals, the team quickly ran into the limitations of the N64, and had issues realizing their scope. The technical limitations weren't the only thing holding them back, however. Warner Bros. Made increasingly drastic requests which hindered development. The licensing team wanted the game to resemble Sim City, and have Superman be the mayor of Metropolis. Kahn fought back against these demands, later saying the mayor idea was pathetic. The micromanagement from Warner Bros. Licensing continued to hold back development, with Warner Bros. And DC Comics questioning Kahn and his team's vision for the game at every step. The team at Titus had to fight for basic functions, with Warner Bros. Refusing to sign off on ideas like Superman being able to swim, and would use Superman comics to back up their points. Titus at one point even made parts of the game destructible, but DC was against the idea of Superman destroying things in the environment, as, quote, Superman could not act like a bad person. The PlayStation version was nixed by Warner Bros., despite being 90% complete. In late 2020, a prototype of the PS1 build would be unofficially published online. Eric Kahn maintains that the primary reason he and his team had so many issues was that a new team had taken over at Warner Bros. Licensing, and these new hires thought a bigger company, like EA, would make a better game, so they held Titus back as much as possible to kill the project. The next N64 title may have gotten bad reviews, but some versions of it are highly prized. Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut is sought after by video game collectors, and often sells for over $2,000 at auction. The title was released as a rental-only game at Blockbuster in the US, making it difficult to find these days, especially in mint condition. What some casual fans might not realize is that Sculptor's Cut was actually based on Clay Fighter 63 1/3, a title that then IGN writer Matt Casamassino stated would remain a prominent title for N64 libraries for years to come, because it's so terrible, it sets the standard for bad. Clay Fighter 63 1/3 certainly didn't live up to the hype, and left some fans disappointed, as it fell behind the standard of the first two games. Clay Fighter and Clay Fighter 2 Judgment Clay were both released for the SNES. Penned as parodies of Street Fighter, the games were well received and sold well, so it only made sense for Interplay Productions to release a new version on Nintendo's next-generation console, the Nintendo 64. Founded in 1983, Interplay had many successful games under their belt before tackling Clay Fighter 63 1/3. The studio developed the Earthworm Jim series, The Bard's Tale, and had lucrative projects like Mario Teaches Typing and several Star Trek titles. Despite their successes, in 1998, Interplay was nearing bankruptcy. While Interplay's money issues would only come to light after Clay Fighter 63 and a third's release, it might have caused management to rush Clay Fighter's development. We talked to Didier Malenfant, one of the game's programmers, to get more info. Malenfant was brought on board in December 1996, in the middle of Clay Fighter's development. He told us he was originally brought on to port the game to the PlayStation, as Interplay had plans for a dual release. In the end, however, they decided to axe the PS1 port. Interplay originally hoped this new Clay Fighter would be a 3DO M2 title, before they shifted focus to the Nintendo 64. But this was a small blessing, as the team had issues working on the M2 and welcomed the change to Nintendo's new console. Scheduling became something that management focused on, and to remain on time, they pulled their resources into the main platform, the N64. While Malenfant didn't know the exact reason why the PlayStation port was cancelled over the N64 port, if he had to guess, it was because the N64 was the newer platform, and there might have been more potential for sales. Interplay had published Carmageddon, developed by Stainless Games for the N64 a couple of months before Clay Fighter, but Clay Fighter was fully developed in-house at Interplay, meaning it was also the team's first real experience with the hardware. Clay Fighter 63 and a third continued the series stop-motion technology for its graphics, and brought in an all-star cast to voice the game's fighters. Dan Castellaneta, best known for his role as Homer Simpson, would voice a few of the game's characters, and Michael Buffer would be the announcer. Malenfant also told us that fitting all of the game's data onto a cartridge was a struggle, and this led to several characters being cut from the roster. While some of these characters would be brought back for Sculptor's Cut, other fighters were not so lucky. Speaking of games with an adult sense of humor, South Park Rally and South Park Chef's Love Shack were both released for the N64 to fairly negative reviews, especially compared to other versions of these games on competing consoles. Acclaim Studios published both titles, with Tantalus Interactive developing Rally and Acclaim Studios Austin developing Chef's Love Shack. These games, which came out earlier in South Park's run, seemed like love letters to fans. They both had a plethora of references and featured the voice talents from the show. However, they also had extremely rushed developments, with some characters being cut from Rally and the amount of content in Chef's Love Shack being noticeably low compared to other quiz titles of the era. Chef's Love Shack on N64 in particular cut out audio, such as when Chef reads questions, and had some lengthy load times. So what went wrong with these two titles? Well, Matt Stone and Trey Parker addressed the less than favourable South Park games on the official South Park blog in 2001. Matt Stone stated, "Acclaim did such a good job of f***ing up the games that now no one is really that interested in the license. I will say this, Trey and I had little to nothing to do with the first games, and if we do another video game, it will be R-rated. We wanted to do that in the first place, but everyone said it was impossible. Now everyone is doing adult-themed games." Trey Parker would have similar comments as well. One developer joked to Den of Geek that Chef's Love Shack was the highest quality you could get with only 5 months of development time. Rally was also developed in a huge time crunch, with only 7 months being spent on every version of the game. It seems that the reason for the poor quality of the first few South Park titles can be boiled down to a couple of points: the lack of editorial supervision from the original creators, and Acclaim Studios rushing out the games for some quick cash. Now that we've experienced the Stick of Truth and the Fractured But Whole, it's hard to see these early South Park games as anything other than wasted potential. Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero was a 1997 action-adventure RPG spin-off released for the original PlayStation, N64, and surprisingly, Tiger Electronics. The game was intended to be a full sub-series, but due to its critical reception, Midway and Avalanche Studios abandoned plans to continue it. In theory, the title sounds great: expand the deep lore of Mortal Kombat while providing Midway an opportunity to break into the side-scrolling beat-em-up genre. The spin-off would also use live-action, full-motion video, and featured the actual fighting actors from the game to show the console's capabilities over the arcade cabinet. There was a lot of care put into the title's story, as John Tobias, the co-creator of Mortal Kombat, headed the project. New characters like Quan Chi would be explored in the title, creating a richer storytelling experience that wasn't doable in a traditional arcade title. However, when it came time to bring their vision to the N64, the team ran into issues. Due to the cart size, the live-action cutscenes, one of the biggest marketing points points for the game had to be replaced with still images and text. This was due to issues fitting all the movie data into the somewhat restrictive N64 carts. In the end, the title was just too ambitious, and the team was too inexperienced with the beat-em-up genre. The devs wanted to include Mortal Kombat's fighting system in a side-scroller, which sounds good on paper, but had issues with implementation. The team opted to stay faithful to Mortal Kombat's fighting game style, which meant they needed a button to turn around, as the directional inputs would also be used for moves. As you might expect, this made the controls very awkward. The RPG system also felt tacked on, and the levels suffered from poor design and a serious lack of polish. We tracked down TabMock99, a long-standing member of the Mortal Kombat community, who gave us additional insight into the development process. During Mythology's production, the Mortal Kombat team was apparently spread too thin. Ed Boon, the other co-creator of the series, was absent from Mythologies altogether, as he was busy working on the next main installment in the series, Mortal Kombat 4. According to TabMock99, Mythologies was Midway's first venture into a proper console title. Previously, games were ported to the console after the devs finished making the arcade game. The team's inexperience with the hardware led to some difficulty, as levels and power-ups were cut. What's worse is that, despite the scope of the project, the team was small, and spent just 14 months in development. There were 5 artists, 2 programmers, and a single sound designer. The team was also trying to work on multiple ports of Mythologies at the same time, including one that was cut. Only a single page from a Dutch magazine exists of the cancelled PC port. Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero would prove to be so disastrous for Avalanche Software that Midway stopped using the team for Mortal Kombat titles, and the Mythology sub-series was scrapped altogether. Avalanche Studios would continue to produce Rampage titles for Midway, but after 2 titles, the studio would produce licensed titles almost exclusively. In 2005, Disney Interactive Studios acquired the company, and Avalanche Studios has produced Disney titles since then. In 2020, it was revealed they will be the primary studio developing a new Harry Potter title, Hogwarts Legacy. Another title that isn't so well remembered was Monster Truck Madness 64. Released in 1999, the title was largely based on the PC game Monster Truck Madness 2. The N64 title was co-published by 2 unexpected partners on a Nintendo platform, Rockstar Games and Microsoft. The game's production was ambitious, aiming to add more courses, more trucks, including a tie-in with World Championship Wrestling, various weather and lighting conditions like fog and night courses, side modes, and more content from the first Monster Truck Madness. Despite the high hopes from Rockstar and Microsoft, the N64 port fell flat. In GameSpot's review of the title, writer Nelson Tarek said, "Playing Monster Truck Madness 64 is like driving a lemon. You really want to get somewhere with it, but something's sure to break down along the way," and scored the game a 3.9 out of 10. Critics generally complained about the difficult single-player campaign and the game's controls. The N64 version has elements that align it more with an arcade racer, such as items, while also trying to be a simulated monster truck experience. The balance of realism and franticness was difficult for the developers at Edge of Reality to achieve. Not only this, but Monster Truck Madness 64 was the team's first N64 port, and they were unfamiliar with the system. We got in touch with Mike Panoff, the game's lead programmer and producer, and asked him what challenges the team faced. Panoff told us that Monster Truck Madness 64 was actually Edge of Reality's first project ever. Not only were they porting the game at this time, but they were also setting up all the structures for the company proper while stretched thin. The team quickly ran into the technical limitations of the Nintendo 64. While Monster Truck Madness 2 ran well on PCs, the team discovered that making it work on the N64's 4 megabytes of RAM and on an 8 megabyte cartridge was a tall order. Edge of Reality was also building their own engine, which was difficult. That same engine would later be used in other titles such as the N64 ports of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. From their experience with Monster Truck Madness 64, the team was able to improve the engine and deliver higher quality titles on the N64. Panoff told us, "We had to sacrifice visual fidelity to make it work. However, we were able to add some cool features like 4-controller multiplayer and some minigames." Panoff wishes that Edge of Reality had more time for polish, but says that he enjoyed making and playing the title. Another car-based game, Carmageddon 64, is possibly the worst review reviewed Nintendo 64 title we're talking about today. Carmageddon was a series produced by Stainless Games and published by Interplay, which we touched on earlier in the video. The series has some inspiration from the Mad Max franchise, and even planned on using the license. Unfortunately, the team was unable to find who owned the license and settled on Death Race 2000. The first Carmageddon was a success, and work began on a sequel very quickly. Carmageddon 2 was released for the PC, and Interplay wanted to release a version on the N64. However, Interplay was going through several changes at the time and was bought by Titus Interactive. Titus, wanting to get a return on their investment, decided to rush Carmageddon 64 out the door. In an interview, producer Ben Gunstone stated that getting Carmageddon 64 working on the Nintendo 64 was a real challenge. He later said the biggest challenge was getting Carmageddon 64 out on time and within budget. The game also had to be changed in numerous regions due to the violent nature of the title. Pedestrians that could be run over were changed to zombies, and in Germany, they were even changed to dinosaurs. The result was a mess. IGN gave the title a 1.3 out of 10 and declared that it was even worse than Superman 64. Reviewers also said that Carmageddon 64 featured terrible audio and sound design, unresponsive controls, and terrible visuals, which made the game virtually unplayable, all because Titus Interactive wanted to make a quick buck. Did you also know that titles like Donkey Kong Country 4 and Pokemon Gray almost came to the DS? For facts on a ton of cancelled Nintendo DS games, check out the video on screen.